Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I am Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Jon Hegglund from Baseball Prospectus. Jon, welcome to the show.
Geez, thanks for having me, Justin. This is being on a podcast with you is a lifelong dream. So I'm glad that we can finally make it happen. And by lifelong, I mean like a 2 to 3 year dream, if I'm being honest. But
I feel like you should aim higher for your dreams.
Well, you got to start somewhere, right?
I guess.
Baby steps, right?
I think my wife would cry a little for you if this was your dream.
No, I'm really glad to be here. It's good to talk to you.
It's great to talk to you. We've never done a podcast together, so I'm excited to finally sit down and have a chance to talk to you one-on-one. Before we jump into all the things we're going to discuss tonight, why don't we start with where you reached on social media and then plug what you do over at Baseball Prospectus.
Yeah, so on Twitter, I'm just at Jon Hegglund, and at BP, in season I do a weekly starting pitcher planner that comes out every Friday. Looking at the following week's matchups, focusing on 2 start pitchers and ranking and sort of putting those pitchers into tiers and giving witty, cheeky asides along with my fantasy advice. And then I am on a podcast with Mike Gianella, Flags Fly Forever, and we record most every week, and those usually drop on Friday mornings. So you can hear me there.
And I hear you every week. I've been a big fan of Flags Fly Forever for a long time, and I've been on once or twice myself. It's and I love Mike Gianella. Mike Gianella is one of my favorite people in the industry.
Mike is great. He's a good friend, and we really enjoy. We consider our podcast group therapy because Mike and Sam Hale, our producer, and I we usually probably talk for about an hour on either side of what we actually record. And those discussions can be pretty far ranging. So it's good to have connections. It's good to have friends in this business, this community, and it's good to connect with you for the first time. So,
do you ever get in trouble for talking too long outside of the podcast? Because I know, like, my wife made me recently schedule out when I was doing podcasts and things like that, and she's like, you can't write down you're doing Sleeper on the Bus for an hour and then be in there for 3.5 hours.
Yeah. I don't know that I get in trouble with my wife, but I will say, yeah, I'm going to the podcast. We'll probably record for an hour and then I'll be up to tuck our son into bed. And she's like, you're not going to be back up for 3 hours. I know how this works, but I do feel bad because Mike's on the East Coast. So when we start recording, it's usually pretty late for him. So sometimes I feel like he's really tolerant of us, but I can hear in his voice that after about midnight his time, he really wants to just go to bed. So
I'm surprised Mike ever actually sleeps, considering I see him tweet like all hours of the night.
Yeah, he's good at the Twitter.
He is. Let's jump into some news. Not a whole lot. I mean, we're not going to talk about Dylan Bundy vomiting on the mound. You did make a very great joke about that. He finally realized what his season was this year, and that must have cost it. But let's start with Eduardo Escobar. Apparently, he's going to be traded. He was supposedly not in the lineup yesterday because there was a deal being worked on, and they obviously didn't want him to get hurt. But he was in the lineup tonight. So, do you have any thoughts on where he might get moved and what his fantasy value might be moving forward, getting out of what is like a hellhole, I guess, in Arizona at this point?
I mean, they're the most cursed team I've ever seen, I think, the D-backs. Everything I've read suggests that it's close to being done with the White Sox. I don't know if anything's come out in the last few hours to where that's stalled out. I mean, like you said, he is in the lineup tonight, so that means that things aren't quite at the finish line. I think he's fine. I mean, I think with the White Sox, they could use a kind of a slightly better than league average bat, which is what I would see him as. I don't know that there's any real fantasy actionable advice here because he's more than likely owned in your league. And if you do own him, I mean, I guess you could dangle him in a trade just with the prospect of some new destination, maybe exciting a fellow trade partner. But he'll keep on keeping on as an everyday player with decent power. Probably not the best average, but he's certainly startable in 15-team mixed leagues. So I wish I had something more exciting on Escobar, but he's fine.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a really nice kind of bounce back this year. I mean, 17 home runs already, which, is great considering he only hit 4 in the shortened season last year. I think a move out of Arizona would be great for him. It's not a great place to hit, especially with the humidor there. And he's moving out of the division, which has got a lot of really good pitchers, to a division with pitchers like Eli Morgan. And Matt Manning, who got destroyed today. And it'll be, I think, a little bit nicer for him, but I don't think it moves the needle a ton necessarily. It'll be nice to know that he's in an everyday lineup that's, decent.
No, that's a good point. If he does go to the AL Central, there are some very, very sketchy back ends of rotations in that division, the ones you mentioned, but also, I mean, Kansas City, for all of the talent they have, the young talent they have, they're not really realized yet. And Minnesota, man, that rotation's kind of a mess. So that could be a good move for him for sure.
Yeah, I like it. Ketel Marte, speaking of Arizona and being cursed, Ketel Marte, he's dealing with a hamstring injury. I believe he's going in for a further examination tomorrow. This has become kind of a reoccurring thing now with him. He's had multiple hamstring injuries. He's had multiple injuries over the last few years. He's finished on the IL 2 seasons in a row, and now has been dealing with injuries all year this year. Do we need to start kind of baking this into his price? He's a fantastic player when he's on the field, but he's missing a lot of time.
I wouldn't want to ding him too much because I think 2021 is such an anomalous year when it comes to injuries. So many players with soft tissue injuries and recurring stints on the IL. And I'll just give a quick plug. If you're not a subscriber to Baseball Prospectus, we just debuted last week the Injury List Ledger, which has the nice acronym IL, which visualizes in a really cool way by team, like all the injuries that have happened, all the IL stints, and it has like a little line representing the number of days, and they're color coded by the part of the body that's injured. And one thing I noticed looking at that is how many repeat IL stints we've seen this year. The one that comes to mind is Adalberto Mondesi when we're talking about soft tissue injuries. A lot of players, I think, are just coming back too soon. It's hard to calculate the lost year and what kind of fitness and game shape was lost even with the full spring ramp up. So Marte is so talented that I think if your league is dinging him for, putting the injury prone tag on him, I think I would take advantage. I mean, obviously we've got a long ways to go before we consider this next year, but the talent is so legit that I still am in Marte's corner for now.
Yeah, I was kind of fading him this year. I was worried about the injuries. He had a back injury in 2019, dealt with I believe multiple injuries in a short season last year, ended the year struggling with an injury. And I was afraid he wasn't going to be healthy. And I'm not trying to take any sort of injury victory lap, but I like Marte as a player. He was a guy that I really liked when he was in Seattle. And I always thought he was going to turn into a superstar, especially with his speed, even though that's never really come to fruition. He's turned into just a really dynamic hitter, just in general. I just do worry about kind of these compiling of injuries over time. If it just, I don't necessarily want to call him injury prone, but until I see him healthy for a little bit, I'm going to have a hard time drafting him at what will probably be, a top 75 price again next year.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think these are good points. I think I'm not quite as afraid. Although I think your hesitancy coming into this year, I think has been justified, unfortunately. But I'll bet on the talent. But again, I really need to see how it plays out for the rest of the year, because if he has trouble getting on the field for a good chunk of the rest of the season, then I think you have to build some of that into your price. But I think the potential there is for him to be, like a top 20 hitter, top 20 to 30 hitter, if he can stay healthy. And, it would be great if he could get out of Arizona, frankly. But I still think he's a really, really great talent.
I mean, I would have loved him to stay healthy so they could have traded him out.
Right.
Because they would have got, with the amount of years of control they have left on him, they would have gotten a fair amount back for him. But I think unless he's able to find some health here before the trade deadline, it's going to be hard for them to move him, unfortunately, for them and for him. Let's talk about some kind of chaotic closer situations, because all of a sudden, like we've gone from a year where it's actually been fairly stable in the bullpens, for the main closers, to all of a sudden a bunch of them are being thrown up in the air. And let's start with Philadelphia. Hector Neris has been kind of demoted out of the closer role. It seemed like Jose Alvarado was anointed the closer, struggled in his first outing in the role, and then we had Archie Bradley get a save here this weekend as well, and Hector Neris got a save as well, though that was in the second of a doubleheader, so I don't know if that one necessarily counts as much. What are you making out of this Philadelphia bullpen? Is there going to be someone we can trust?
No,
Okay.
There isn't. No, I was writing some notes because you sent me the rundown, and I was writing some notes, and the one note I have for this is ugh. I guess you sort of operate under the assumption that it's still Alvarado, but like he's walking 7.5 hitters per 9, and Bradley's not that much better. I mean, Bradley was my second closer in TGFBI, and obviously he did not last with my squad for that long, and so I've been scrambling ever since then.
I'm only laughing because I had about 12 shares of Archie Bradley coming out of draft season. I was sure when they paid him the money that they were going to give him the role. And he was really good in spring training, but Hector Neris was really good too, and they gave him the role.
I mean, Alvarado's probably owned in your league. I don't know, maybe do a spec pickup on Bradley and just see what happens. It's a shame because this is actually a pretty good team that – you do foresee quite a few save opportunities. They've got some very good starters, but I don't know, talking about cursed the Phillies bullpen, it seems like for the last few years, it's where pitchers just go and completely lose their shit. And I kind of want to stay away from that situation, to be honest.
It feels like a team that should be much better than it's been performing. Like, when you have Zach Wheeler having an insane year, Aaron Nola being Aaron Nola, Zach Eflin being decent enough, and then you go, okay, the offense, it should be stacked too, right? But Segura got hurt, Didi Gregorius got hurt, Bryce Harper's been kind of in and out of the lineup with his own issues, and then the bullpen has just been a dumpster fire at times. Like, it feels like a team like they just can't get out of its own way.
Yeah, it's rough. I don't know what to say about them. The thing about that division though is that no team really seems to want to run away with it. The Mets have been better lately, but the Braves have not been good. The Nationals are improving, but it's that division is theirs for the taking if they could shore up that bullpen and maybe find another bat or two at the trade deadline and hopefully get Segura healthy. But that bullpen is it's not a good situation. And we say, I think in the preseason we're always like, well, the closer who has a job even on a bad team and even if he doesn't have the best skills is worth owning. And then you get into the season and you get a run of like ratio destroying outings from these guys and you don't get the saves. And then you think, really, is it true that these pitchers are worth owning? I don't know. So I don't have any shares in that bullpen right now, and it's probably going to stay that way.
Yeah, unfortunately, especially in TGFBI, I'm forced into situation, because not only did I have Archie Bradley as my second closer, I had Trevor Rosenthal as my first closer. And but then I also like spec'd on guys like Jonathan Hernandez and Nick Whitgren, so I'm fine right now. I'm not fine. I'm not fine at all.
Yeah.
I have spent probably $750 of fab on chasing saves, and I have 11 or 10 saves. 10 saves.
I mean, oh man! I mean, if it's any consolation, you are the Failed Closers Anonymous support group is a very large one.
Yeah,
like, you don't just fill the little room; you fill the big banquet hall, right? And when you all meet up, so it's rough out there. It really is. I mean, I guess the other side of it though is that, like, I think in a lot of leagues, and this is certainly true in a couple leagues that I'm in, TGFBI and Tout Wars Draft and Hold, both, is that you can get to like the middle of the saves pack with like one solid closer and then kind of a part-time closer, or, someone who's in a committee. You can do okay with that. You won't be, in the top 3, but you'll be in that kind of middle, crowded area. And that's enough if you are doing well in other categories, you can still be competitive. So.
Yeah, I mean that's playing out in a number of my leagues. I know in the tag team league I'm in with Shelly Verstrate, the difference between 15th place in saves and 4th place in saves is 10 saves.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just a huge difference. We actually speculated on like 3 different guys this week, trying to see if we could bump our way to the top of that pile. But it's one of those categories where you can really make a lot of room if you make smart decisions. Do you think Hector Neris is worth holding on to?
I that really depends on your roster. I think it's tough in a TGFBI NFBC roster situation. I think if you can sort of make room for him on your bench for a week or two. I don't hate that, just because saves are so sparse and hard to come by, that the benefit to Neris is that he does pitch for a good team. So, looking at Alvarado and Bradley, it's sort of like, I mean, maybe Neris ends up being the guy. I don't know.
I agree. I think if you can just kind of wait and see, Neris could be the guy that, ends up coming out of it with the saves in the long run anyways. Especially you mentioned Alvarado's walk rate. I mean, he's walking everybody, and that's going to come back to haunt him. I know the numbers otherwise have been good for him, but you can't put that many people on the bases and expect not to get blown up a bunch of times. So I think some negative regression is probably coming to him in the future. Let's talk about Cincinnati, because there was a feeling like this was going to be a jumbled bullpen from the start, even though Amir Garrett and Lucas Sims both proclaimed they would be the closer in spring training. Neither have been able to hold down job. Lucas Sims has now gone to the IL. Sean Doolittle never even was able to get going, really. And now Brad Brock has gotten a save. Is there a guy that can emerge from this group?
So I think right now I want to own Garrett, if anyone, just because he had a really poor start to the season, but over his last 10 appearances, he's had a K- walk percentage over 30%. So he's doing those kind of closer things. And it looks like Sims is going to be out for probably a month. We don't know how long it would take him to work his way back into the role. He was pretty good. Tejay Antone is going to be out for a while. There were thoughts that he might take the role, but when he's healthy, he's probably more valuable as a multi-inning guy. So it's kind of like Garrett's the last man standing. I don't know. Brad Brock does not interest me in the slightest. I want a closer with skills, with closer-like skills. And I think Garrett's the one that fits the profile for now. And check back with me in a week after he's been blown up 3 times and his ERA is above 5. So I don't know.
And that's the thing, because we want a closer with skills. A manager wants a closer to just get the job done.
Right.
And often they revert to whoever is the most quote-unquote experienced right-hander in a bullpen, and right now that's Brad Brock. And so I think if you're looking for just saves, Brock might be the answer, but at what cost, I think, alludes back to your early point.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, as a spec pickup, sure, why not? This is, I don't, did he get picked up widely in TGFBI and NFBC this past Fab season or weekend? Because
I know I picked him up in 4 different leagues. I got him for cheap, so I can't imagine people were going crazy because I got him in both my main event leagues. I got him for $3 and $5 each. In TGFBI, I think I got him for $4 or $5, but I also got Alvarado for $8 in TGFBI as well. And then the tag team league, I think I got him for about $17. So I don't think he doesn't seem to have been widely sought after because I if he was, I wouldn't have got him for those prices.
Yeah, it could be a righty-lefty thing with Garrett for now, which gives him the advantage. I still think I want Garrett because of the skills, but I don't mind the Brock spec play for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Garrett is a much better reliever, and I really hope he is able to figure out because he's a fun player to watch.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Super exciting and super athletic. Let's talk about Detroit. Michael Fulmer comes back, and it's like, hey, he's going to get saves again, and he might even be a trade piece for the Tigers. And then he's got a cervical strain a neck strain. It sounds worse than it actually is, but he goes back to the IL. Jose Cisneros gets a save. Is there somebody worth speculating here?
I mean, it's the Tigers. So look, if I'm being perfectly honest, I haven't really been paying close attention. I guess I probably want Cisneros just because he's a righty and his control is a little better than Soto's. But again, I wouldn't spend much on that situation because it's Detroit, and the only situation where I want to own a Tigers closer is if that is the guy, and there isn't a committee or there isn't some fluidity in the role. So I just am not sure about this situation, but I guess Cisneros would be my target if anyone.
Yeah, if I'm desperate, I'm going for Cisneros, but I'm not spending a ton of fab either because I don't think Fulmer is going to be out an extended period of time, and I think Fulmer goes back to being kind of the main guy, or at least the greater portion of it once he's back. And so I don't want to waste a lot of assets to get a guy that's probably not going to be closing for very long on a pretty bad team.
Yeah, totally.
Let's talk about some players that we might be dropping, some hitters we might be dropping. What I did was I went over and I searched WRC Plus the wrong way. I looked for the worst WRC Pluses, and I kind of picked some names. These are all guys who are in the bottom of WRC Plus over the last 2 weeks and out of the bottom 30. Let's start with Gleyber Torres. His WRC Plus over the last 2 weeks is -15. That is
if it's negative, it's good, right?
No,
it doesn't. That's not how it works.
It does not work that way, unfortunately. For those who don't know, WRC Plus, an average WRC Plus is 100. It's based on what an average WRC Plus is, and that's 100. So -15 is really, really bad. For reference, over the course of the last 2 weeks, he has 0 home runs, 0 stolen bases, 0 runs scored, 0 RBIs. His triple slash is 079, 186, 079. And he's been bad all season long. Is it time to drop Gleyber Torres?
I think it's time to trade for Gleyber Torres.
Okay.
So the player I think about when you're reading those Gleyber stats to me is Keston Hiura. And I think of them together because these are both players who are young, who were top level prospects, and who have had a fairly extended run of success in the majors. Okay. I mean, Gleyber had, basically almost 2 seasons in 2018-19. He's still only 24, Gleyber is. So I think that you have to stick with it. because there's no real, and even like, the Yankees are saying, Aaron Boone is saying, we don't know. We just think it might be, it might be mental. It might just be a couple of adjustments. And I think that a young player who's demonstrated skills at the major league level in the past is in the likeliest group to turn it around. And, it's too early to judge if Hira is going to be productive for the rest of the season, but the signs since he's come back have been good. And even if you only get like 60 to 70% of like 2019 Glaber, that's probably still going to be better than what's on your waiver wire at this point. So I'm not ready to drop him. It's bad. It's been bad. I think it's going to get better. It might not be 2019 better, but I think it'll end up being okay for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is we saw what happened in 2019. We're like, oh my God, he hit 38 home runs. He hit 278. This is, stole 5 bases. This is a monster in the making, right? He's so super young. He's on a really good team in a really good park and in a great division to hit. And I think 2019 was an aberration. Like, he did a lot of that damage. I think he hit 17 of those 38 home runs against the Orioles. And he, I can't remember. Somebody did the math on it recently and said, like, if he had, just played against the rest of the league, he would have hit like 265 with like 20 home runs. And I think that's probably what he is, right? He's probably a 20 home run hitter with a handful of stolen bases and a 260 batting average on a good team. When he's hitting well, he's hitting at the top of what is usually a pretty good lineup. And so I'm not ready to cut bait. You've got to get him out of your lineup. He shouldn't be in your lineup. And I've got him in a 12-team league, and he has been sitting on my bench for an awfully long time. But I do agree that I think there are better days. You look at some of the underlying skills, he's making just as much contact as he did in 2018, 2019. I think part of the issue is he's gotten a little passive at the plate. And I think maybe he's just, because he's struggling, instead of trying to be aggressive and go after early pitches in the count, he's being a little bit more passive and waiting, and that's actually costing him. And I think he needs to try to, instead of being passive at the plate, get a little bit more aggressive, go after early fastballs and crush them a little bit more. And I think that he will figure it out at some point. He's too young to just give up on.
Yeah, the question is, does he figure it out in time to be useful this year, or is it a year or two down the line? The player that I'm reminded of when you talk about being too passive is Yoan Moncada, who, had a 30 above 30% strikeout rate, and yet he never swung at the ball. He would take pitches, get into 2-strike counts, and then either take strike 3 or swing at a bad pitch. And I think that's, of all the adjustments that you can make, that should be an easier one to make. It's not. I don't want to shortchange it, because if you're used to approaching an at bat in one way, you can't just sort of spin on a dime and say, just swing earlier in the count when you see a pitch in the zone. But I think that's not a deal breaker, for me, for Glaber. And to your point about the Orioles, he's still in the same division with Baltimore. He still gets to go to Camden Yards probably a couple more times this year. So that could be the catalyst he needs. But I'm not out on Glaber by a long shot.
Yeah, getting to in Yankee Stadium, getting to go to places like Buffalo and Fenway and Camden are great opportunities for him. And I think he can't be any worse than he's been. But yeah, definitely get him out of your lineup for right now and hope that he starts turning it around pretty quick. Let's talk about a player who has been a real pleasant surprise, but has gone ice cold over the last 2 weeks, and that's Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Over the last 2 weeks, he's hitting 154, 185, 231, 1 home run, no stolen bases. Have we gotten all the goodness out of Kiner-Falefa, and now maybe we should start to think about moving on?
I would say no, because as long as he's leading off and playing every day, I think the steals are worth it. The steals are where most of his fantasy value comes from. And to a lesser degree, the runs. I mean, on the steals piece, Texas is tied for fourth in the majors in stolen base attempts. If I did my math right, going into today's games, he's got 15 steals. That's not what that's much better than you would have hoped for. I think it's really hard to cut someone who is doing that well in a category where 15 steals is a real difference maker at this point. If he's on a pace for 20 to 25, given that a lot of players sort of slow down later in the season. In runs too, I mean, he is 40th in the league in runs, which doesn't sound like much, but he's tied with the likes of Tim Anderson, Kyle Tucker, Aaron Judge. So it's a category that you can overlook, but he's actually holding his own in that category. So I think I watch him closely, and I really watch the lineup. And if he drops, because he's probably not going to lose playing time because he's their best shortstop. But if he drops down to 7th, 8th in the order, then I start to get the itchy trigger finger. But until then, I think I just put him in and hope he banks some more of those steals.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there because, I mean, like you said, he's leading off, and leadoff hitter is valuable. I don't care what situation you're in, especially because I think runs are probably the most underappreciated stat category in fantasy, at least on the offensive side. I think whip is probably on the pitching side. And you can always use more runs. And like you look at kind of up and down this lineup, like who else are they going to lead off? Like it's really not anybody
Joey
there.
Gallo is probably the most likely candidate to lead off because of the OBP, but that's obvious that then you're taking him out of a a 3-4 spot. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could try Select, but he's had a bad OBP, and then it gets pretty ugly after that. So
I mean, I think they're gonna let him stay there. And I mean, worst case scenario is you've already banked a lot of goodness with him, and at least you'll still get stolen bases, which are the hardest, stat to get here in fantasy. I know I've already punted stolen bases in a league because I'm just done in that category at this point, and I wish I had an Isaiah Kiner-Falefa on that main event team. So I don't think you can move on, but I think you got to just kind of hold tight for right now and hope that he turns it around. He's going to get better. This is just, I think, a minor slump that he'll get past. Yeah,
he's not a bad player.
Mm-hmm. What about Pavin Smith? I mean, he was a guy that people really started to like, and I got into an argument with my co-host Paul Sporer about him recently on the podcast. But he has been brutal in the last 2 weeks, hitting 209, 227, 233. He's got a 25 WRC plus, no home runs, no stolen bases in that time. Is it time to move on from Pavin?
Maybe. Yeah. He's a boring player. He's not a difference maker in any category. And I think with him, the reason to hold is the average, and that's, sinking like a stone. So I'm fine cutting him just because you're not getting, you said 0 homers and 0 steals in the past 2 weeks. That's the key right there. He's not a difference maker in power or speed. I think he's fine. I actually own him in an NL only league, and I think he's fine there just because of the playing time. But I think in a 15-team mixed league, he's probably pretty close to droppable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is right now he's striking out more than he has all season, striking out almost 30% of the time over the last 2 weeks, which is a drastic change for a guy who for the season has been striking out at like 17% rate. And because he hits so many balls on the ground, if you're not making contact as well, you're really, really going to struggle, and you're going to offer no real fantasy value. I think it's time to probably move on. If he ends up getting hot later on, you go back and pick him up. But he doesn't have enough power. He doesn't have enough speed. He doesn't have enough team contacts. I mean, Arizona, it's a barren offense right now. Like, you're not going to get runs and RBIs either. So I think it's best to move on, go for the hot flavor of the week, and then, keep an eye on him, keep him on your watch list, and go back to him if he starts to get hot again. Yeah,
it's easy to fall in love with young players, rookies that come out of the gate and do well initially because you think, oh, they've arrived. They're one of those hitters that can just hit the ground running in the majors. But almost inevitably those hitters, the league catches up with them. And it's not like Smith was tearing it up, but he was doing pretty well for the first, 6 weeks or so of the season. I think the league's caught up with him a bit, and you should bench him or even cut him while he goes through that period of readjustment. And the tiebreaker for me is that team context. It's just pretty abysmal right now. So I only want Diamondbacks that are really going to be difference makers in at least one or two categories.
Absolutely. What about another guy who doesn't have the greatest of team context, and Anthony Santander? He was a guy I really liked coming into the season. I felt like he was a little bit underrated, but he has struggled this year, and he's really struggling these last 2 weeks, hitting 171, 227, 220 with 0 home runs, 0 stolen bases. Is it time to kind of give up on him for the year?
See, I don't want to. The thing is that he's battling this ankle injury, and he's trying to play through it. The thing about Santander is that in his career, he has a slugging percentage above 500 for 2 months of the season, and those months are July and August. His hard hit percentage is actually at a career high. It's above 40% for the first time in his career. I guess I want to hold to see if he gets thrown on the IL with this ankle thing. I think the best thing for the Orioles to do would probably be to rest him and let him get right. I know they have a lot of injuries that they're dealing with. Based on the skills though and the power, I would be pretty hesitant to give up on him now. Maybe bench him until the next homestand, because you get, even if he's 80% of what his potential is health wise, you get him in Camden Yards on a warm homestand in July, and there's bound to be balls leaving the yard. So I think the power is there, and if he's healthy, I think he's definitely worth owning.
Yeah, this one's a really difficult one for me because I really like him a lot. He was a guy that I was trying to target in drafts quite a bit. Got injured in spring training, and so I backed off in some of my later drafts. But like, the max exit velocity is 88th percentile. He's making decent enough contact inside of the zone. I think part of the problem is he swings a lot outside of the zone, which can lead to kind of these slumps. And I do think the health thing makes a lot of sense. If he's not healthy, he's not going to be able to tap into that power and get around on some pitches. And I do wonder if maybe they need to shut him down for a little bit, maybe give him some time until the All-Star break. I can understand moving on from him, especially in your 10 and 12 team leagues, but he's a guy that I really want to keep an eye on and see how he's doing, even if I drop him, because he will be kind of one of those instant grabs if he starts to get on a little bit of a hot streak.
Yeah, I think if you're in a league that has IL spots and you are making a trade with someone who owns Santander for another player, getting Santander as a throw-in might not be a bad idea if that person is completely done with him. I just think that there's a non-zero chance that he goes on a tear for the last couple months of the season. But if you're in a league where roster space is tight, I wouldn't hate you for cutting him. I just think there's more if he can get healthy.
I mean, to his credit, his X batting average is 272. So he should be hitting about 40 points higher than he has been. So, I mean, that's a sign that maybe things will turn around fairly quickly.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the next guy, and that is Robbie Grossman, who's kind of been one of those guys that I got late. It was one of those targets, that we were talking about with like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, where it's like, you always need leadoff hitters. Leadoff hitters are great guys to get, especially when they're going outside the top 200, top 250 picks, and that was Robbie Grossman. But he's been struggling right now. 29 WRC plus, hitting 146, 226, 229, 1 home run, 0 stolen bases in the last 2 weeks. They've actually moved him out of the leadoff spot a few times recently. Is it time to start thinking about moving on from Robbie Grossman?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan there. I think maybe in an on-base league you give him a little more time. In an average league, I think he's easily droppable. His ideal role is probably as a short side platoon / bench bat. He's not terrible against righties, so the platoon splits aren't completely ridiculous. But at the same time, he's consistently much better against lefties. Tigers have some young outfielders. They're trying to sort through that situation there. Daz Cameron looks like he's into the mix now. We don't know how long it's going to take Riley Green to get there. Probably not until September, if at all this year. But Grossman, even though he's on a 2-year deal, it's only $10 million. It's not they can write that off pretty easily. I could see the playing time becoming an issue if he doesn't improve in the short term, because the Tigers really, they're not playing for this year or even next year. They're just trying to see what they have in terms of young talent. So Grossman's not really a part of that future.
Yeah, I could definitely see them trying to move him actually at the trade deadline because I think there are teams that could use an outfielder right now. Specifically a team like maybe the Angels, who have no outfielders left. I mean, I was called upon to play outfield the other night, and that didn't go well. And I mean, you could see him on maybe a team like the Braves or someone like that. But I'm going to hold on to Robbie Grossman. The 8 stolen bases so far and 9 home runs are pretty nice from a guy who's been batting leadoff, especially if he gets to stay in Detroit, where he can continue to hit at least first or third. Hit third tonight, hit a home run. So maybe he's already starting to turn it around. I think Grossman is one of those kind of boring players that people don't maybe give enough credit to. He volumes his way to some fantasy relevance, and it's been pretty decent in spite of the 225 average this season.
Yeah, the steals are a good point. He's been sort of this sneaky contributor in steals, even when he was with the A's. And you look in the stat column and you see 9 and 8, but then you look at the plate appearances and you see that, the 9 were over 482 and the 8 last year were only 192 plate appearances. So the stolen base per plate appearances is pretty good there. I guess there's no reason to. I guess it depends on what your other options are. I think, one thing that I've noticed this year is that outfield is really shallow. It's really not deep, because in 15-team leagues, the back end of that pool is going to be mostly like platoon guys you can't really play every day if you're setting a weekly lineup. So guys like Grossman are probably worth holding on in 15-team mix for now. But I just, I think his name sums it up perfectly for me. It's gross, man.
I think one of the other issues with the outfield this year is there's so many guys who are eligible at other positions. And so you may be using a guy like Brandon Lau or something like that at second base, or other guys at other positions. And so that actually takes out of the player pool of what's available, because outfield is probably it feels like it's the worst it's ever been.
Well, every time it feels like every week in TGFBI, I'm looking at the waiver wire because I need an outfielder, and it's depressing just combing through. And it's like, me looking at Jason Hayward again going, really?
I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I just can't do it with Hayward.
It's not great. So with that in mind, Grossman's probably on the back end of your starting lineup right now. In an ideal world, he would probably be on the waiver wire, and that might come to pass in the not too distant future. Who knows?
What about Charlie Blackmon? Charlie Blackmon has got a 39 WRC plus over the last 2 weeks. And he's got 1 home run, 0 stolen bases, hitting 146, 226, 229, striking out almost 30% of the time. This is not the Charlie Blackmon we're used to. Is Father Time finally caught up with him?
Oh yeah, no question it has. But the thing is, you have to separate in your mind. Did I buy a player who is rapidly declining, which you did? not you, but
Oh,
whoever.
I did. He's on
Okay, you did.
both of my main event teams because he fell so far. I was like, can't pass him up now.
And you have to separate that from, is he better than what's on the waiver wire right now? And the answer is almost certainly he is. He's still an accumulator in terms of runs and RBI. The weather's getting warmer. He plays in Coors. He hits near the top of the lineup. You just got to suck it up, I think, with Blackman at this point. I mean, he's someone I wonder if, well, he's probably not going to get traded. I mean, he's someone though who you might actually want him to get out of Coors just because the lineup context is so bad there. And he's not really a power guy anymore. But if he's, as long as he's in Denver, he's probably the second best hitter on that team after Trevor Story still.
And probably gonna, well, I mean, I guess Ryan McMahon is probably in that discussion now. But I mean, chances are Story gets moved at the deadline here. And Blackman can't be moved, not with what he's got in terms of his contract.
Big old contract. Yeah. I think you just ride or die with Blackman here.
Yeah, I think you have to. Unfortunately, he actually got dropped in one of my leagues in a 14-team league, and I was like, you know what, this might be a mistake, but I'm picking him up because he does play in Coors, and as it warms up in Denver, those balls really start to fly. All 4 of his home runs this year have been at home. I don't think he's going to be the player he was, and I do think it's going to turn out to be a mistake having drafted him this year, but I just can't seem to let him go. I think he can't get any worse, and I think he's probably a guy who can hit 270, maybe even better rest of the way, and hit at least another double-digit home run. So, maybe the end of the year line is going to look something like 20 home runs and, a 270 average, and that's not what you paid for as a top 150 pick. But ultimately, like you said, there's not a ton on the waiver wire in the outfield, and you probably need to go just grab him if he gets dropped.
I guess in his favor, I would say that he is still getting on base at a good clip. He's got a 366 OBP, which helps even if you're in an average league. That should help his runs. And the metric we use at BP for evaluating batter skill is DRC plus, deserved runs created plus. So it's on the same 100 base scale as like WRC plus. And even though his WRC plus is only 95, his DRC plus, which is the best stat in the business, if I don't say so myself, is 110. So according to our metric, he's still 10% better than the league average hitter when it comes to skills. So, he's just not the Charlie Blackman that's the former, top 20 overall pick, but he's still usable and useful.
Yeah, I mean, his X batting average is 293. So that would put him right near where he usually is anyways. If I think the major problem is he's hitting the ball on the ground a lot right now. And maybe there just needs to, a hitting coach needs to take him aside and kind of rework his swing a little bit and try to get a little bit more loft, especially in that gigantic outfield in Coors. If you get the ball off the ground, you're going to get base hits.
Yeah, and you're going to get home runs too. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is it would be nice if he could, if his career trajectory could be a little more power, maybe even at the expense of batting average. I mean, this is selfish for fantasy players because that's what's more useful to us. But, Charlie, think about it.
Well, and I mean, it should be in his best interest too, because teams pay for home runs, right? They probably should pay more for average in contact, but they don't. They pay for homers. So maybe you need to give Charlie a call and kind of get into his ear.
I got him on speed dial. So
all right, good to know. What about Jesus Aguilar? Jesus Aguilar, he had a pretty decent start to the season. All of a sudden, it seems to have disappeared. No home runs in the last 2 weeks, hitting 189, 53 WRC plus. Is it time to move on from Jesus Aguilar?
I think I'm okay with him in my corner infield spot for now. If something better comes along, I probably okay dropping him, mainly because that team is kind of a sinkhole. Probably literally soon in the case of Miami, which will be underwater in the next 10 to 20 years. Welcome to Climate Change with Justin and John. But he's still a pretty good hitter. Speaking of DRC plus, he's got a 111 DRC plus. He's okay. He's fallen off a little bit in the on base percentage, but he's he doesn't strike out that much, even less now than he did earlier in his career. He's still got some power. I think that it would be a mistake to drop him on the base of a slump over the last 2 weeks. I think his true talent level has been pretty well established, and I think it's kind of corner infield utility level for fantasy. And he's still at that level for me until further notice, I think.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think he's making almost an 85% in zone contact. He's a guy who's always done well inside of the zone. He hits with power. I think it'll be interesting to see what Miami does with a guy like him at the deadline. He's got 1 year left of arbitration before he's a free agent, but he's obviously not built for, he's not part of their future in any respect. So he might get moved to a team where he becomes kind of a platoon bat or a bench bat, and that would be a little bit disappointing. But I think until that happens, I think he'll turn it around, at least in the short term. But I think long term, he's probably not going to hold very much value, especially if he does get moved.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
All right, let's finish out with Hunter Dozier. Hunter Dozier is one of these guys that has had kind of these up and downs. A few years ago, he was everybody's favorite sleeper, right? He was a StatCast hero. His StatCast stuff was blood red, and everybody's like, here's the breakout. And we got a little bit of it, and then last year he got COVID, and kind of a lost season. This year he's dealt with injuries. Right now, really struggling. 6 WRC plus. Yes, I said that. 6. It's the second lowest to Gleyber Torres over the last 2 weeks. No home runs, no stolen bases. Hitting 132, 195, 184. He's triple eligible, which makes him insanely valuable in your deeper formats, being able to move him from first, third, and outfield. But it's not insanely valuable if he sucks.
Yeah, so what you're telling me is he's unplayable at 3 positions, basically, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this is just, he's being paid off by Bobby Witt Jr. to suck so hard that the Royals are forced to call Witt up. I've never been a Dozier guy. I just feel like the swing and miss has always been a problem. It looked maybe like last year in the short season. I mean, it was okay in 2019, but if I'm remembering correctly, he really fell off toward the end of that season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Last year he walked more, but everything else the power was down. I just don't think he's a major league bat, to be honest. So, and again, to, harp on the DRC plus, he's at 75, which is a fair ways better than his WRC plus. But he's not good.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: like he's got power. We know for sure he has power. When he makes good contact, the ball flies off the bat, and he makes a fair amount of zone contact. 86% zone contact percentage is just above league average, right? So for a guy with power, he's making a good amount of contact in the zone. The problem isn't the stuff in the zone; it's the stuff out of the zone. He swings at it all the time and misses it quite a bit. And that's leading to a 30% strikeout rate. This is a guy that honestly needs to go down to the minors and rework things, I think. And until someone pulls him aside and reworks things, or they send him down to the minors and he reworks things, I just don't know that it's going to change. And as much as I've liked him in the past because of the StatCast numbers and the potential I see in how violently he swings that bat, I just don't think it's going to come together for him until he reworks things at the plate.
He's 29. He'll be 30 in August. So he's not a young player anymore. And we've got over 1,400 major league plate appearances with, a 237, 308, 433 slash line. And I just think in the macro, all the things you say are true about the hard contact that he has in his skill set. But if he can't get to that hard contact regularly, and if there's too much swing and miss that, his plate appearances become a liability, I just don't see it. The Royals are a team that's it's weird to say this, but they're going to be turning the corner, I think, in the next few years. They've got all that young pitching talent. They've got Bobby Witt. They've got some other interesting prospects. I just don't think Dozier's a part of that next good Royals team. And for this year, I drop him. I don't really want him this year. In just about any league format.
Yeah, and in spite of the fact that they signed him to a long-term deal, it's a really, really team-friendly deal. It's $24 million over 4 years, so it's not it's $6 million a year. It's not like it's something that's gonna be cost prohibitive if they want to just eat that one, because they don't have a ton of money on the books either. So I think that if I was the Royals, I'd be sending him down to wherever that AAA system is and trying to rework it. I know he's 29, almost 30, but sometimes you need that. Maybe he can come back and be a useful player, but right now he's not useful to anyone.
He's got one option left, so they could do that. He could be someone who they could, they're probably not going to find anyone to take him with that contract, but I'm sure his name will be dangled out in plenty of trade talks as we approach the deadline. The problem is that he's not showing anything that's going to make a team that's going to generate interest from another team, probably. But yeah, I talking about Hunter Dozier makes me excited for Bobby Witt.
I think we're all excited for Bobby Witt. I actually dropped Bobby Witt in a league this week just because I needed the bench spot. But I'm hoping he comes up and does well because he's a fun player to watch.
He is indeed.
All right, John, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. Hopefully next time we can have you over to our place and you can drop in on Flags Fly Forever.
I'd love to come back and be on Flags Fly Forever. It's, again, One of my favorite podcasts. I listen every week. Remind everybody again where you can reach. No. You guys are awesome over there. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug everything you do on top of Flags Fly Forever.
At Jon Hegglund on Twitter. I've been trying to argue less on Twitter, but it's pretty easy to poke the bear. But I do love to connect with people on Twitter and Baseball Prospectus. I write a weekly starting pitching column, which comes out on Friday of every week during the season. And then occasionally I'll just be writing other stuff, both on the fantasy side and the main site, and Flags Fly Forever, the podcast, which comes out just about every Friday on a podcast purveyor near you.
And you can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. You can email me or the show, Friends of Fantasy Benefits @gmail.com. Read all my work over on Fangraphs, Friends of Fantasy Benefits, and TGFBI.com. Hear me on the Friends of Fantasy Benefits podcast, obviously, the Sleeper on the Bus podcast, and the TGFBI podcast. That will do it for us. For John and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.